to it. You said you do the flip. Take me through the touchdown and the celebration.
Okay. The play been drawn up all week. It was a great time to call it. I had a chance to give y'all guys the up and over, and we went up, and we went over. 6 to the boy. 6 to the boy. You know. Okay. Much love, much love.
Much love to Mr. Excitement.
Welcome one and all to another edition of Football for All, hosted by yours truly, Zach Keilman. You just heard audio from Martez Carter, who had one heck of a day for, well, an LA team that had one heck of a coming out party for Week 3 in the XFL. That was one of the highlights of Week 3 that really stood out the most, especially the front flip. Man, talk about a killer move going into the end zone and finishing out on a promise. That's an example, by the way, of how to execute an excellent sideline interview after a play. And Jenny Taft, congrats on doing that. That was well put together, and Martez Carter did a great job with the response. It wasn't generic, if you ask me, when he responded to Jenny. We had a lot to talk about on this Week 3 edition of Football for All here. Starting off, of course, we're going to get into the LA party crashing that was their home game versus DC. I also am going to get you some details on what I thought the Dome was like for that Battlehawks home opener. I was there, brought my dad along for the event. It was killer. Hung out with XFL Fan Zone staff Scott Burke at a tailgate, and it was amazing. I cannot say enough. I got a lot to talk about there as well, and we're going to get into basically who maybe I think this week can stop the Roughnecks. Dallas might have a good shot. I'll get briefly into TV ratings as well. TV ratings, to me, it's something you have to keep up with, but I have a little note on that. Let's get into the show, man. We got a lot to talk about. So one thing's for certain that I did say last week that really became clear in this contest is Josh Johnson is a difference maker. Hands down. You want to talk about the biggest change to LA that is from Week 1 to Week 3 is Josh Johnson. The man is legitimate talent for the XFL. He is a ideal quarterback for this league, someone that can deliver the deep ball to a T, somebody that can bring out the best in his dynamic playmakers when needed. And especially since Nelson Spruce sounds like he'll be out for Week 4, you're going to be relying a lot more on Trey McBride and Jordan Smallwood heading forward. And Trey McBride stepped up in a major way in this game. He was fantastic. Funny enough, I have him in a fantasy league with the XFL Fan Zone staff, and I benched him originally. He wasn't doing much, but man, I'll tell you what, he came out and dominated against DC. DC just looked lost. I don't know if it was just miscommunications for the majority of the game, but Cardell Jones could never get comfortable. He could never seem to find a repertoire with his receivers for the contest. And Pep Hamilton, in some of his headphone conversations with Cardell, it just seemed like he was not on the same page with Cardell, or Cardell was not on the same page with Pep. Who knows if they'll get that fixed up. They have a get-well game for certain against Tampa Bay, but it is an away game at Raymond James Stadium, so maybe the Vipers crowd will play into some of the noise. Also the fact that the Vipers have their own interesting quarterback situation coming up too, with Taylor Cornelius going to get the full start this time. Quentin Flowers had to step away for a personal issue. We don't really know what that is, but it is big news since Aaron Murray was projected to start Week 4. Looks like he'll take another week to sit out before they try again in Week 5. But looking again at this LADC game, I was just, and many of us who follow the XFL as diehards, were just astounded at how well LA came out and performed. I mean, and especially LA's defense. Winston Moss fired then defensive coordinator Pepper Johnson after Week 1, and Week 2 didn't seem to pay off as much dividend. They did only lose by 7 to the Dallas Renegades in Week 2 to a 25-18 score, but nobody expected them to only hold the DC defenders to 9 points. You have to remember the Defenders at this point have been considered the most well-rounded team in the league, not only defensively, but for certain offensively. I mean, Cardale Jones has been arguably in the MVP conversation with P.J. Walker at this point up until now. And, well, we have to see how Cardale responds because, again, this is going to be telling to see what kind of team this is. Because if you look at DC's schedule, they really have only played what many of us consider the bottom barrel of the XFL, which that means that week 1 they beat Seattle, which Seattle, if you look now, is 1-2. Defensively, Seattle is a strong powerhouse, but on the offensive side, a lot of inconsistency. They do have a 3-headed monster at running back, but they just can never seem to get it hot with Jaquan Gardner or Kenneth Farrow. And Brandon Silvers goes hot or cold at some of the best and worst times throughout the beginning of this season. So not really sure what to say about the Seattle victory now that we look at it. And, well, if you look at them beating down on the Guardians, you can make an easy case that the Guardians might be the worst team in the league, although the Vipers do have an 0-3 record, and New York's been imploding lately, and we're not really sure what DC is going to look like just yet because they haven't really faced top-tier talent as of yet either. Unless LA is going to be top-tier talent. Who knows? I mean, again, Josh Johnson changes this offense for the better tenfold. I mean, he was delivering some dimes on Sunday for sure, and we're not going to be done with him at all coming up. I mean, think about the Battlehawks, my Battlehawks. I am very curious to see how that game plays out now. Speaking of the Battlehawks, they were one of 2 teams left to debut a home opener for the XFL. And by golly, and I mean saying by golly, which is not used much anymore, but I do like that terminology, man, was it a hell of a home opener. I was there in person. I had to bring my dad with me. I really wanted to see how this would turn out. My dad also was technically my ride. If you don't know what I do outside of this, I work night shift, and I would have not been able to make this game if it wasn't for him. So if he's listening to this, props to him, and for an excellent weekend. We actually explored St. Louis entirely for my weekend, Sunday through Tuesday. Excellent town, by the way. If you get a chance to go visit St. Louis, get some barbecue, and go explore some of the sights and sounds, do it. There's a lot of great stuff out there in St. Louis, Missouri, as well as football. And there were a lot of fans for the XFL Battlehawks. A lot of Kroenke haters, too. This is expected, though. Stan Kroenke really did just uproot this team and leave. And there is an argument that stadium attendance wasn't to a T to an extent, but at that point, the Rams were kind of a joke. They had been a joke for a while. Do you really think people were going to turn in for a team that the Rams were at that time? I mean, even then, the Rams now, you look at how they've been and how cap-locked they are in the NFL, they're lucky that they even got a Super Bowl run out of that team. And they're still having somewhat of issues in Los Angeles. Meanwhile, here in St. Louis, they're craving for football. Here comes the XFL. Boom. The Battlehawks are here. The Battlehawks are a playoff contending team. And their home opener was electric. Let me tell you, it was electric. Not only do you have 29,554 people in the stands, which they probably could have easily cracked 30,000, but the XFL, I think, was smart to limit how much seating they had for this game, mainly because you don't want to oversell, and you also have to worry about staffing. You also have to worry about perception. I mean, geez, if you've been following pro football talk, you know about perception. They love to grab any negative piece they can about this league. It's just a common denominator for them. But so far, that was probably the best decision they could have made. That stadium was rocking. I mean, that roughly 30,000 people in there was fantastic. I have my dad quoting me saying that he arguably thinks that was the best home field advantage he has ever seen. The most one-sided crowd he has ever seen, which there were a lot of one-sided Battlehawks fans, a lot of Kroenke sunks chants. Again, Stan Kroenke, man, you messed up. I think, the NFL, as another little side conversation, St. Louis deserves a team again. This is a city, I think, that easily would still sustain a team. They sustained it for 20 years, for crying out loud. They were able to see a Super Bowl, for crying out loud. That city deserves a team. You got to say God bless to the Battlehawks for coming in and bringing a show. Now, I will mention that the Dome of America Center, it's okay as a venue. At least the seats I had were okay. I will admit mine was slanting down and to the right, so if I was sitting down, it was whatever. But I mean, we were standing up most of the time because, well, they dominated the Guardians 29-9. Not to mention, how can I forget the first special teams kick return touchdown in XFL history? And boy, it was a doozy. Personally, I had to witness it on the television monitor because while I was buying merchandise, I had to check it up on the screen. And I will tell you, it was a sight. Just the pitch reverse to Joe Powell, which, by the way, quick nod to Joe Powell, Arena Football League star for the Baltimore Brigade as of last year, making a name for himself on special teams here for the St. Louis Battlehawks. Rest in peace to the Arena Football League. And good to see an Arena Football alum make his way to the XFL scene, possibly more to the higher-up pro scene. It was a sight to behold watching that kick return, and it was just a heck of a day. It was a celebration of football. If you want a description of for the love of football, go to St. Louis for a home opener, man. Go to St. Louis for a football game. These people love their football. They love having it back. I mean, I've been looking at the ticket sales already again, and they've already said that they've easily sold 20,000 seats. Doesn't mean that they'll sell out, and personally, if anyone thinks that they're going to consistently get higher numbers week in, week out, again, this is a first-year league, and people first show up for the shiny new object in town. Not saying St. Louis won't show up again because there's many other home games, and I've been seeing that people are buying those tickets, but back-to-back home games, it's probably harder to sell those tickets to sell out a second time. If they were able to, it's great, but I will mention that right now, if you look at for Week 4's tickets, man, the resale prices have skyrocketed. The cheapest ticket you can find in St. Louis is $60. And they do advertise them at $24, but when people buy all of them up and resell them, it's kind of hard to have, but it shows there's a demand for football in St. Louis, Missouri. And by God, I could not say enough about the experience. The town is great. The football was great. The XFL is great in that city. And the NFL made a massive mistake leaving. So St. Louis definitely has a playoff team to rally behind. The St. Louis Battlehawks are now officially number one in the Eastern Division when you consider the touchdown differential between them and the Defenders after Week 3. However, in the West Division, in my opinion, and to many other people's opinion, is now arguably the best team in the XFL. With the likes of PJ Walker and Cam Phillips on that offensive side of the ball, it's kind of hard to stop June Jones and company with the XFL's Houston Roughnecks. And the big question now is who can stop these guys? I mean, if we're looking at the XFL as a whole, realistically, I would say maybe 5 teams can realistically stop the Roughnecks. 6 if you're on a good day for the Seattle Dragons. Again, Seattle's very inconsistent. I can't see them putting enough of a game together to defeat the Roughnecks with how powerful that offense is. But this will be the second biggest test for the Roughnecks. They did get by the Battlehawks, but by the skin of their teeth. St. Louis was able to dominate and chew clock in the second half of their Week 2 contest, which, if it wasn't for a potential offsides call, we might be talking about an 0-3 Battlehawks squad out in the Midwest. Meanwhile, though, the Roughnecks are visiting in Dallas this week, which it looks like that game's going to be pretty packed up over at Globe Life Park for a contest with the second-place Western Division Renegades. And this is really going to be a contest that's going to play into playoffs and implications. They do meet up again a second time, however, Houston will get that home nod later in the season. Now, if I think there is a team that can defeat the Roughnecks, the Renegades have a heck of a chance. This is another well-rounded team, and I think more of a contended well-rounded team than DC right now. They definitely have a better quarterback overall from the looks of it. Yes, Landry Jones has thrown a lot of picks since he's come back from injury since Week 2, but he has been throwing consistently well if you're considering completion percentage, yardage, and now he's picking it up with the touchdowns. He threw 3 last week in Seattle, and I think this trend is going to continue. The Roughnecks defense is not as strong as people think. I mean, the Vipers put up 27 on them. And I don't think anyone saw that game turning into a barn burner that it was. And I don't think anybody saw the Vipers having any chance in that contest, and yet they were right on the goal line or within scoring distance twice to end the fourth quarter. And Trestman, of course, being Mark Trestman, made some mistakes at play calling, couldn't figure it out. But I do think the Renegades are the ideal matchup for the Roughnecks, simply because they have the defense that I think can swarm to P.J. Walker's mobility and to keep Cam Phillips in contain. Now, if we look at the rest of this squad, I mean, the other big name acquisition that was supposed to be on the Roughnecks for receiving was Sammy Coates, and he's been an afterthought through 3 weeks. Honestly, he has to be arguably one of the most disappointing players in the XFL. Considering how much playtime he had with the Pittsburgh Steelers, I'm shocked that he's done so little for the Roughnecks. And, well, if you can contain Cam Phillips and you can keep P.J. Walker on his toes, well, then I don't know what you can really do on the opposite side of the ball. I mean, the Renegades have a really well-rounded offense, and whenever they decide to not use the air raid attack, because trust me, they love the air raid, of course, go figure, they do have an excellent running game behind Cameron Artis-Payne, which could play a factor into this. I do see the Renegades possibly pulling this out. I actually have them as an upset pick this week, beating the Roughnecks, mainly because, again, it's a well-rounded roster. And these last 2 weeks, whether it's against the LA Wildcats or against the Seattle Dragons, that defense has been stepping up in a major way when it's needed to. And it's been one of the most efficient defenses in the XFL. So, big test here for the Roughnecks. If they can get past the Renegades, then I say there's very little in the XFL that can stop the Roughnecks. I mean, they're probably still my pick right now for the XFL champions for Season 1, and I don't see much changing if they get by the Renegades. With Week 4 being upon us, one thing that we continue to watch as this league progresses through its first year is TV ratings. And I almost hate talking about this anymore because there's so many different slants to TV ratings that can make it a make or break for the league as a whole. And in my opinion, it's kind of just a bad cycle because you talk about down ratings, people will start getting disinterested because, no one's watching it, so why should I watch it? Go figure. Or they'll consider it a bad product or something along that line. That's kind of how I see these things. And yes, if you want me to be honest, yes, XFL ratings took a dip again in Week 3. There's no sugarcoating around that, okay? Okay? I got it out of the way. I had to say it because it's part of what the XFL is right now. The ratings took another dip. I will say for broadcast, it took a much less amount of a dip than it did Week 1. I can spin it like that. I can spin it by saying that the two combined broadcast games were 2 million viewers average, and that the combined cable games were roughly 1.2 million viewers average. But even that being said, the true facts are ratings took a dip, okay? That's as simple as that, and people are going to list it off as that. And you know what? All I can say is this. If you're a fan of this league, just watch it. Just keep watching. If you're able to keep watching, keep watching. Because you know what? Broadcasters, and I said this on Twitter earlier this week, broadcasters are looking to us to prove that this league is viable. If you want spring football, if you want to see spring football succeed and thrive, and if you want to see the XFL be part of this mess of a sports spring that is going to be upon us, then you need to turn that TV on, or I recommend, because I can't tell you to do it, that's not a thing, I recommend highly you turn the TV on, or you convince people to say, hey, you know what? So there's some good football being played right now on FS1 or being played on ABC or Fox. Don't let it slip away. Right now, I am pretty much saying I am along for the ride. I, of course, have to read the XFL ratings because this is what I'm interested in. I'm trying to make a podcast where I can report things accurately to you. And I have to pay attention to these things. It's as simple as that. Does it mean I enjoy it? No. No, not right now, because there's, of course, a lot of uncertainty. And, of course, with spring football, the track record for it is not great. You know, most of these leagues are fly-by-night one-season leagues. The XFL has been proven by many critics. It's a good product. A lot of people like the product. They like what they're doing. They like what they're doing on the broadcast. They like what they're doing with the kickoffs. They like what they're doing with the offensive schemes, the touchdowns, the extra points. They like the football. But people have to watch it. Because at the end of the day, the broadcasts are still what matter. You still have to get eyeballs for advertisers to put ads on these things to watch the XFL. They have to watch on Fox. They have to watch on ABC. They have to get viewers on ESPN. And the FS1 numbers, honestly, FS1 can take what they want because FS1 is lucky to have the XFL. And the XFL easily beats any programming on FS1 right now. But for the remainder of these broadcasters, you have to bring the eyeballs. And I encourage you, if you want to make sure people watch this, or if you want people to watch this, tell them about the football. Show them highlights from social media. Get them excited. Show them this is a good product. Because there's a lot of misconception going out there that this product for some reason is weak. There's a lot of misconception going on that it still is trying to beat the NFL. And I feel a lot of people are just stubborn and saying that, well, I don't want to watch any XFL that's compete against my NFL. I don't want to see the NFL have to fight them. And let them know that's not the case. It's coexistence. It's not a main competition. If you love this league a lot, try the best you can to watch because those numbers do matter. They eventually will matter. And it's going to get tested through the whole year. That's the thing. We're still going to get a whole season. They easily have the whole season funded. They easily are going to play through the championship. It's going to be the off season that matters with the broadcasters talking to the XFL about what the TV deal is going to be for next year. Because at that point, we'll know in particular. So keep watching. It's good football. And if you've been watching, you know it's good football. Keep telling people. Eventually, if you show them just enough, they just might turn that television on and they just might show up. Personally, as a final note, I do predict, and if I'm wrong, I'll obviously say how much I don't understand people's tastes, but with Fox having Seattle and St. Louis playing a game together for the two markets that have been the biggest in the XFL, I'm predicting that the Fox game is going to bump up ratings. It's going to be better ratings than the last Fox game this previous week 3. And I also predict that the FS1 number is going to go up. Simply because for FS1, that is a playoff caliber game with a lot of implications. And I think it's going to get hyped up that way. And if you don't think that it will, then hype it up yourself. Again, we're fans. We self-promote the league too. So let's make sure we self-promote it right as well. Because again, I predict those two games in particular will get bumps. Which if they do, that's a good sign. That means people will write about a good sign. We'll find out. But I'll tell you what, this week's matchups still look promising either way, even with those goddamn TV ratings. Finishing up here, I got my Week 4 picks for you, as you can also catch those Week 4 picks on XFLFanzone.com. We are going to have those listed up. The entire staff always makes picks for the week, and I might as well just list mine out on my podcast while I'm at it. So for this week, LA versus New York, I got the Los Angeles Wildcats defeating the Guardians in New York City at MetLife Stadium. Meanwhile, Seattle is visiting St. Louis for the second straight game at the Dome of America Center. I have St. Louis winning once again at home in a thunderous environment. Meanwhile, Houston is on the road once more. They are doing the Battle for Texas Part 1 at Globe Life Park against the Renegades. I have this as an upset, as I mentioned earlier. I see the Renegades with Landry Jones, Cameron Artis-Payne, Jeff Badditt, and company getting an upset victory over the Roughnecks. I just think that the defense of the Dallas Renegades will overwhelm the Houston Roughnecks, and they will not be able to recover in time. And I think Houston's defense will finally be exposed properly on TV. And to wrap up the contests, we've got DC taking on Tampa Bay for Tampa Bay's second straight game at Raymond James Stadium. I think this is an easy bounce-back game for the DC defenders. Cardell Jones will realize how much he needed to adjust himself and his communication with Pep Hamilton, and I think they'll cruise to an easy victory on the road in Tampa Bay over Taylor Cornelius, Mark Trestman, and company against the Vipers. And that's about going to do it for this edition of Football for All. I appreciate the support. It's been pretty awesome seeing how many people have been tuning in for this podcast with the XFL going on. I will keep on doing well to you guys on these, and I promise more interviews with people. This week I just was kind of, with coming back home from the little mini vacation me and my dad had in St. Louis, didn't really have enough time to schedule an interview with someone. Don't worry, I do have some people in mind that I will be contacting and get interviews on, because, well, there's some really unique takes on not only the XFL, but some of the things that are going on with the league and some of its players that I do want to touch on come the Week 4 edition of the podcast. Until then, be sure to follow me on social media and many of my platforms. I am on Facebook, Instagram, and Twitter. You can find me at all those platforms by searching at ZK Podcast. That is at ZKPODCAST. You can also follow me over there and give me a subscription on YouTube if you like. That is where I'll post podcast episodes up just as kind of video format. I sometimes do my own update content on there too. You can also hit the subscribe button on any of the podcast sources that you use, and you can get the podcasts as soon as they are posted rather than seeing them on social media when they post. Because sometimes I do post them early, by the way. So if you want your content earlier, I suggest you hit a subscribe button wherever you're at. Until next time, guys, follow me on those social media platforms. Follow XFL Fanzone at XFL Fanzone on Twitter, where you can also find content from me and many other awesome fan creators passionate about the XFL. Until next time, guys, enjoy Week 4 and stay tuned.